But first tonight, hard conversations needed to be had today when the Prime Minister met with Chinese President Xi Jinping in Beijing. But judging by the Prime Minister's press conference after, Albo is just cuddling up to China, and I'll show you that in a moment. But look, it was all smiles today, and boy, it was like watching two lifelong best friends fawn over each other.
With joint efforts from both sides, the China-Australia relationship has rose from the setback and turned around, bringing tangible benefits to the Chinese and Australian peoples. The most important thing we can learn from this is that a commitment to equal treatment, to seeking common ground while sharing differences.
I note your comments in your opening remarks about seeking common ground while sharing differences. That approach has indeed produced very positive benefits for both Australia and for China.
Has it really, all that common ground? Anthony Albanese even posting this picture of the two of them getting excited by that shared common ground. Except, of course, this is China we are dealing with, our greatest strategic threat. And there isn't a lot of common ground to work with. Remember the live fire drills off our coast, the spy ships sent our way, the military near misses, the punitive tariffs on Australian goods, and a lack of investigation into the origins of coronavirus. Even today, a group of Australian TV journalists, including from Sky News, were blocked from getting on their bus by local security officials before that meeting began and were told to hand over their footage for viewing by Chinese police. And luckily, Australian embassy officials successfully intervened. What was that again, about common ground? In fact, I am willing to bet Anthony Albanese went into the meeting with President Xi with a shopping list of grievances between our two countries, but barely said boo. And judging by his press conference after the meeting, it doesn't really leave you with much hope as to how strongly he prosecuted the issue of live fire drills and spy ships.
Did you seek assurances that Australia would be better informed in future about the PLA's Navy in Australian waters, and has China asserted its right to free navigation in those waters?
Yes, to the former. And secondly, in response, of course, it was President Xi said that China engaged in exercises just as Australia engages in exercises.
Well, look, good to know what Xi said, so, all must be okay then. Why is the Prime Minister acting as a mouthpiece for the President? So the journalists then sought clarification.
So can I just clarify on that answer that you specifically sought that the notification was really the issue that Australia had earlier in the year?
I said what I said at the time, which was that it was within international law. There was no breach of international law by China. But that we were concerned about the notice and the way that it happened, including the live fire exercises.
Oh, well, that settles it then, doesn't it? The live fire drills were all above board. And so the journalists sought clarification again, and once again the answer was just as bad.
The military build-up and what its purpose is, what China's strategic and military aims are.
Well, you would be surprised if that was brought forward I'm not sure what you're getting at or what you're suggesting might have been raised. I'm not sure the context.
Well, your government's raised concerns about the military build-up and the lack of clarity around what it might be used for. Do you feel confident that China is a force for peace in the region after this meeting, or do you?
Well, what we did was we put forward Australia's position, or I did, which is that we want peace and security in the region.
Well, the Prime Minister has given a stronger position on China's interests than the Australian. And listening to that, it makes you wonder how little was said by Albo. The Prime Minister also confirmed the Port of Darwin was not raised, despite promising to take it back from China.
I don't need to.
No, sorry to jump in. What?
None. It wasn't raised. I can't be clearer than that.
Were any issues raised by him?
I can't be clearer than to say the question I was asked was not raised.
Look, this is a Prime Minister who is so scared of offending. The Australian's foreign editor, Greg Sheridan, actually summarised very well the Port of Darwin's situation today.
But because Canberra is so nervous, so fearful, so hesitant, if you want the company to sell the lease, tell them to sell the lease. If they won't sell it, then take it back as an act of government. Then the matter is done and resolved. At the moment, because a coward dies 1,000 deaths and Australian governments are so cowardly, we're just trembling and in terror time after time.
Now, this was, of course, Albanese's fourth meeting with China, and that round table, as you can see there on the bottom of your screens, is still going. The meetings today are still happening. And gee, it's such a strange situation because our Prime Minister is out there looking like the best friend of Xi Jinping, while at the same time at odds and alienating our #1 ally in the United States. And this visit comes as the US is demanding we lift defence spending and clarify our position on Taiwan should China go to war. Now, of course, the US is watching this extended visit to China closely, and Xi Jinping has the handsome boy exactly where he wants him. Even before today's meeting, the China Daily, Beijing's mouthpiece, praised their handsome boy in an editorial called Common Ground Prevails Over Differences. It said Australian PM Anthony Albanese's ongoing visit to China is not only of significance for the bilateral and trade relations between the two countries, it also sends a message amid the changing global trade landscape. Nothing like the kiss on the forehead from communist China, and why wouldn't there be? I mean, remember when the Chinese conducted those live fire drills off our coast and the Prime Minister went into nothing to see here mode?
Is this time to sort of take a stand against China publicly, about their actions?
Well, it's important as well, and Defence have confirmed that China did comply with international law. This is activity that has occurred in waters consistent with international law. Australian Defence was certainly aware.
Or how about when a Chinese spy ship was gathering intelligence off the coast?
We won't, for obvious reasons, broadcast everything that we're doing, but we're keeping an eye on this as we do. Of course, I would prefer that it wasn't there.
And obviously it's gotten worse since. Our ADF is preparing for the arrival of Chinese spy vessels monitoring Operation Talisman Sabre. But the Prime Minister, again, isn't fussed.
That would be nothing unusual that has happened in the past. And I'll continue to assert Australia's national interest as I do.
So it's no wonder Beijing's mouthpiece was all praise for our PM, even noting his extended stay in China is notably long for a state leader. It went on to say Albanese's visit shows that the Australian side has a clearer judgment and understanding of China than it had under previous Scott Morrison government. Well, of course China is all praise for Labor, not Scott Morrison. I mean, how dare the former Prime Minister ask the hard-hitting questions on the origins of COVID, what happened in the Wuhan lab, China's ambitions in the South China Sea, and on the punitive tariffs imposed on Australian goods like lobster, barley and wine. Everything Albo wouldn't dare touch. Scott Morrison has responded, telling The Australian, having a character reference from the China Daily was never one of my foreign policy aspirations. Well, I say, wear it as a badge of honour. Now, the difference between Anthony Albanese and Scott Morrison, of course, is that Albo is an apologist for China. China has eagerly responded to his weakness, throwing its support publicly behind Anthony Albanese, while trying to drive a wedge between Australia and the United States. And experts agree.
It seems to me that the most important goal of Xi Jinping regime in this visit is to divide the United States and Australia.
Which, of course, works very well for Beijing, and it seems as though this Prime Minister is all caught up in the hype and spin. Anthony Albanese has always been weak when it comes to foreign policy. That is why he can't stand up for our values on the world stage. That is why the PM cannot get a meeting with Donald Trump. That is why Australia is drifting away from the US, from a long-standing alliance and straight into the arms of China, blinded by the Beijing pomp and ceremony with promises of free trade and seeking common ground. And let's be real, China couldn't give a toss about seeking common ground. China does what China wants. It's just a shame the handsome man from Australia is so dizzied by the red lights.